Welcome everybody, and welcome to the day 2 of Experimenter Curators Hub 2020. We had a deeply enriching session yesterday with Rux Media Collective and Naomi Beck with making their presentations. This may have by far been the widest and largest Curators Hub we've had, with hundreds of participants joining in from different parts of the world. The advantages of being online are these, but there are also disadvantages. But staying online with advantages, we are also trying to learn, adapting ourselves to the online space optimally, and to really use it to its full capacity. Keeping in with the spirit of the conversation that marks the hub, which if you've been to the hub, you would realize that the conversation is a crucial aspect of the hub. We will be extending the hub after the last presentation is over into a free-flowing conversation where you will be able to participate with video and audio, see each other and truly interact with each other and the speakers. During this time, we will stop broadcasting on Facebook, but we will still create, hopefully, a productive conversation environment. It's going to be something that is going to be somewhat of an experiment, but I'm pretty certain that we will be able to create a little bit of an essence of the hub in physicality if it were to happen here on the online space. During this added 30-minute free flow, I would request you to please keep your audios on mute and wait for the questions to be answered before asking your questions. Also, it is possible that your questions may not have been asked and answered. You may leave those questions on the Q&A box or send them to us, and we'll try to at least get them to be answered. And more on this later, but that's only at the end of the session, but we have very exciting conversations coming up today. Really looking forward to the presentations that we're going to have today. Before I give the online space over to Natasha, I would like to thank Natasha again for holding the hub and organizing it the way it's been organized. Also want to call out an incredible series of conversations and interviews that has been assembled together by Sky Arundhati Thomas, and it's on our blog. And please do look at them. They're extremely insightful and beautifully worded. Of course, the Experimenter team, without which none of this is possible to do. And our partners, Australia Council for the Arts, Goethe-Institut, British Council, and Take On Art magazine. Thank you very much for your continued support. Without much ado, I now hand over to Natasha. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to day 2 of Experimenter Curators Hub. Thank you so much, Prateek and Priyanka and the team. For those of you who weren't with us, and also those of you who were, I'm going to do a quick revisit to our day 1 program. But I'd also like to foreground the significance of the hub, thinking with curatorial practices that build informal and formal alliances across Asia and the Asia Pacific, fostering a closer dialogue with South Asia and practitioners from Southeast Asia, Australia, and the UAE. And with that, also welcoming Luli Eshraghi and Reem Fadda, as well as Naman Ahuja, our guests of today, where we foreground aspects of critical realism and dialogical approaches practiced through associative histories, geographic affinities, practices of friendship across borders, and institution building that takes location as a grounding for imagining otherwise and away from imperial models in staging contemporary cultural environments and public education. Yesterday, we had Rux Media Collective addressing us by braiding their positions emergent in the Yokohama Triennale Afterglow, addressing toxicity, the roles of cleaning as perennial practice of care, the vibrancy of autodidactism, and luminosity of friendship with artists and public. They quoted from Svetlana Boehm's words, Friendship is not about having everything illuminated or obscured, but about conspiring and playing with shadows. Its goal is not enlightenment, but luminosity, not a quest for the blinding truth, but only for occasional lucidity and honesty. And let us remember the fact that toxicity, particularly keeping in mind Japan's history, is never contained. It is unbounded and in flow like a sand clock, transforming human landscape relations from body to body. We also had, in a previous edition of Experimenter Curators Hub, Nora Razian, who spoke of planetary ecologies in relation to toxicity, more than human intelligence, and collective responsibility through her projects. Let's Talk About the Weather, and I Will Return, I Will Be Millions, in the context of the October Revolution in Beirut as part of Homeworks Forum. And I wanted to remember those projects that were also part of this forum previously. In their conversation with Sky Arundhati Thomas, Rux addresses the notion of governmentality of creativity, stating, the image of creativity that is emerging now is different. It is one of interrupted spatiality. It is mobilized in unpredictable instances. It is perennial. It perennially secretes, exudes, extrudes, excretes, emanates. I wonder how this may become valuable in continuing with a multi-headed and multi-form approach to creative resistance and anomalous kinship in a time that is ruthlessly divisive and pervaded by everyday authoritarianism. Complacency is a far more dangerous attitude than outrage, said the Chicana feminist musician Naomi Little Bear Moreno. In her presentation, Naomi Beckwith spoke about what it means to grapple with racial reckoning, the debates around who has the rights to images, made more complex today, and yet how these should not be navigated through a lens of what are called overheated passions or disrupted audience critique, but rather through structural change, because as we know, the museum and institutional environments have been called to task many a times through the decades. To call for then inclusivity within the operational terrain of cultural institutions as we move through the vulnerability of creative livelihoods today. Naomi also spoke of sitting in a place of perpetual grieving and mourning as an ontological condition, deeply personal and communal, as a way to define Black life and the pileup of hostilities, but also listening to the calls for refusal. As a closing note, I would carry into our first presentation of today the way that Naomi called for curatorial relations that are excessive, beyond the exhibition sphere and the museum walls, such that these relations are in flux and multivocal. Our relations as being excessive, undisciplined, fueling alliance building, fueling horizontality, need not and must not be consensus driven. They cannot be sanitized and neutral between institutional leadership and cultural workers. There are so many conversations to be had, and those are in excess and of excess, being excessive as a way of defending and as a way of being together